Negro League baseball was so popular that black churches would move their service time up an hour so fans could go to the game. If you know anything about the black church, you don't mess with service time.
There were African-American professional ball players in the 19th century.
But segregation starts to tighten its hold.
Well, what do you do?
We can do this on our own.
A few entrepreneurs see that a black club can be a successful business.
Rube Foster.
Light years ahead of his time.
Effa Manley.
The first lady of black baseball.
Negro League players made the game more up-tempo, bunt and run.
Base stealing. These incredibly acrobatic catches.
The major leaguers would say that the Negro Leagues didn't play the game the right way. Really, that was saying they didn't play the game the white way. Wherever you had successful black baseball, you typically had thriving black economies.
You have vendors and you have advertising. You know, people were making money from it.
But integration was going to kill their businesses.
It was good morally, but that progress came at a cost.
White fans saw a kind of baseball they had never seen before.
Great ball players of the leagues.
Jackie Robinson.
Buck Leonard.
Satchel Paige.
Willie Mays.
Cool Papa Bell.
Hank Aaron.
Oscar Charleston.
Joshua Gibson.
Would transform the game.
They are a part of a movement. Before we coined the term civil rights movement.
Man, they didn't care about making no history. They just wanted to play ball. But the pride, the passion, the courage in the face of adversity, that's the real story.
Welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. Today, we delve into the captivating world of Negro League baseball. Today, we are joined by the esteemed filmmaker Sam Pollard, whose latest documentary, The League, celebrates the triumphs and challenges faced by African-American baseball players during the first half of the 20th century through previously unearthed archival footage and never before seen interviews with legendary players such as Satchel Paige and Buck O'Neil, as well as Hall of Famers Willie Mays and Hank Aaron. The League sheds light on the rich legacy of the Negro Leagues and their pivotal role in shaping American sports history. Sam Pollard, we welcome you to the Black Press's Let It Be Known. How are you?
I'm fine, Stacey. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us. We're going to jump right into this. First and foremost, how did the documentary, The League, come about, and what inspired you guys to explore the rise and fall of the Negro Leagues?
It all started with a young man named Byron Motley, whose dad, Bob Motley, had been a Negro League umpire in the 40s and the 50s. And they had written a book together about Bob's adventures on the journey through Negro League baseball teams. And then he had also shot interviews with former Negro League players like Max Manning and Monty Irvin and Willie Mays. And so he wanted to put together a documentary and asked me if I would direct. And that was around, I'm going to say 2016, 2017. And like most documentaries, we had to go through the hoops to figure out how to raise the money. And by 2020, we got this company Radical involved, run by Dave Saralnik and Jen Isaacson. And they got involved in helping us figure out how to bankroll the film. They brought on Questlove as an executive producer. And we were able to get funding from 29, Magnolia, and this other company called Play Action. In 2022, really, we started shooting the film.
Wow. So, the commonly accepted narrative of African Americans in baseball often starts with Jackie Robinson and his integration of Major League Baseball. How does the league challenge this narrative and shed light on the true story of Black baseball?
Well, basically, we learned that the Negro Leagues was something that came into being in the early 1920s, started by a gentleman named Rube Foster, but a pitcher and a manager. And he had this great idea of starting Negro League baseball teams around the country, particularly in the Northwest and in the Midwest. And other people, entrepreneurs, started creating Negro League teams. And by the 20s, it was a popular form. it kind of lost its way when Ruth Foster passed away in the late 1920s, but then it had a resurgence, specifically in Pittsburgh with two gentlemen, Posey and Gus Greenlee. Gus Greenlee owned the Pittsburgh Crawfords, and Posey had the Homestead Grays. And that was sort of the second iteration of the Negro Leagues. And, you meet, as you said, Satchel Paige and Josh Gibson and Cool Papa Bell and Max Manning and Buck Leonard and Buck O'Neill. And, so it's really an opportunity to see how important the Negro Leagues was as baseball, but also as important they were in the communities, Black communities, where they helped, economically, these communities thrive. And it was an opportunity to really dig into the idea that we all, like you, I grew up thinking Jackie Robinson, integrated baseball, and the whole world changed. But we learned that there was a whole world before Jackie Robinson integrated baseball that was just as vital and just as important.
Well, and not to get ahead of myself here, but, this is tackled in the film too. Brilliant film, by the way. I hope everybody, whether you're a baseball fan or not, watch this because it's an education for sure. One of the things that it seemed to intimate, which is something I've talked about recently, is that integration, we fought for integration, for school integration, this integration, that it wasn't necessarily the best thing though.
Well, that's the thing that we've all come to learn about this history of America. We fought so hard in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s with Dr. King and SCLC for integrating America. But what did we sacrifice with the integration of America? We sacrificed communities, even though they were segregated. We had people in the community who were working class people, professional people, all in the same place, all where they were passing their funds, their money around, from the barber shop to the store, from the store to the baseball stadium. It was a sort of an economic hub. Now, when those of us who had the ability to leave the community, to go into this white American suburbs, what happened to these Black communities? Every one of them, if you name Harlem or Bronzeville, they all, disintegrated. They lost their impact. And, this is, and the thing that we need to understand, Stacey, is that integration is kind of a double-edged sword.
Right.
On one hand, we had the ability to integrate America, but on the other hand, there's still a separate America. You know this. So
schools are as segregated as ever.
As they were. That's exactly right. So it's a complex thing. But when I was growing up in the 60s, as we should have said, when Jackie Robinson integrated Major Leagues, it was like manna from heaven. Everything was going to be better. But that wasn't the truth. And even Jackie realized that, so.
Well, we also, I'm sorry, Mr. Pollard, we're talking with Sam Pollard. He brought to us this fabulous film, The League, about the Negro League baseball, the history of the Negro League's baseball. We also saw, and you mentioned Jackie Robinson, we talked about Jackie going to the major leagues with the Brooklyn Dodgers, but we saw the Negro Leagues in the film really shines a spotlight on this, how the vibrant, the entertaining style of play that the Negro League baseball players had. And really, people say, oh, you shouldn't compare, but their style of play, which later the bunting, the hit and run, the stolen base, was widely adopted by Major League Baseball.
Widely adopted. I mean, even in the film, in The League, there's a little piece of footage where you see Jackie, going from, I guess, second base to third base, and he does a little skip and a dance, which he learned from the Negro Leagues. I mean, they brought a certain pizzazz, they brought a certain energy in the game. Even so, when I was growing up, and I saw people like Maury Wills, I saw people like Willie Mays, with his great basket catches, they were bringing that kind of same kind of thing that the Negro League players were bringing to the game.
Yeah,
and if you go forward to Lou Brock or Ricky Henderson, the same kind of charisma and panache that the game had, So, it's amazing how you think about it, Stacey. When you first thought about basketball in the 30s and 40s, it was an all-white game, right? Black people come into that game, and what happened? You think about football, Black people come to that game. Same thing with baseball, man.
And you also noticed too, Sam, I don't know how closely you follow Major League Baseball today, but you also noticed that these rule changes, right? All these new rules in Major League Baseball, really the bigger bases, the encouragement of the stolen base, the encouragement of the hit and run. Again, it goes back to where? The Negro League.
Negro Leagues, exactly.
So it's really interesting. The Great Migration of African Americans from the South to the industrial Northeast played a big role in the growth of Black baseball in cities like Dayton, Ohio, Chicago, Illinois, Pittsburgh. How did the migration influence the development of the league and their impact on the communities?
Well, what happened was Black people moving from places like Alabama, Mississippi, going to these Midwestern cities where there was the Industrial Revolution happening. Baseball follows. And the community are excited to go see ball games, go to see games in Dayton, go to see games in Newark, go to see games in Pittsburgh, you know. So, you know, it was sort of like our communities flourished and grew, you know, both from an entertaining perspective and also from an economic perspective. Look at someone like Gus Greenlee. He not only owned the Pittsburgh Crawfords, but he had a club called the Crawford Grill. And the Crawford Grill attracted musicians from Mary Lou Williams to Lena Horne to Errol Garner, you know, and then you had players who would go after the games to those clubs like Satchel Paige or Josh Gibson or Cool Papa Bell. So, you know, the community was working hand in hand with those in the professional business world and those in the sports world. And, you know, those were exciting times for our community. Even though we were segregated, they were exciting times.
Yeah, and also the East-West Classic that was created about 1933. It became this seminal event for Black America in the 30s and 40s. How did this all-star game contribute to the recognition and popularity of the Negro Leagues?
Well, as Buck O'Neill said, did he say, you know, we would come in on a Thursday and we would hang out, you know, we'd play a game, we'd go hang out, and we would leave on a Sunday or something, you know, and everybody would come together. You saw the thousands of people at Comiskey Park, you know, in Chicago, all these Black people dressed in sharp coming out, you know, to support the teams of these all-star players from Cool Papa Bell to Josh to Satchel to Max Manning. You know, it was amazing.
Yeah, it was easy to, and still is for folks to compare, right? But when you think about, you mentioned Satchel Paige, for instance, there was a series of face-offs between Dizzy Dean and Satchel Paige, which helped raise public awareness of Satchel Paige's immense talent. I mean, this man, I mean, he pitched what, till he was nearly 50 years old, I believe.
Yeah, he did.
And what's the significance? Elaborate, if you will, on the significance of these matchups and their impact on breaking racial barriers in baseball.
Well, I think someone like Dizzy Dean, who was a Southern boy, you know, he was an entertainer also. And he knew that by barnstorming and playing against Negro League players, you would bring out an audience, both Black and white, to sell tickets. And that was part of his strategy. But he also said, if he had one player that he admired, he says this in the film, it was Satchel Paige. You know, he said him and Satchel Paige could win a pennant by July because they were both so good. But, you know, Kennesaw Mountain Landis banned that stuff. Yeah. You know, he didn't want Black players and white players playing the game because, you know, he didn't want Black players showing up these white baseball players. And you know, when he passed away, Happy Chandler became the next baseball commissioner, you know, with the prodding of people like Grant Trickey decided, well, now it's time to integrate the game. And think about it, we just came out of World War II. African Americans are fighting against fascism and Nazism, you know, and they're being welcomed in places like England and in France. And they got to come back to America that says, you can't walk into the front of my restaurant. You got to sit in the back of the bus. Black people got tired of that stuff, you know?
Yeah. Well, and also, I mean, it's so interesting. When you think about those players, wasn't Satchel Paige the individual, at least by legend, had it that he had called everyone in to his outfield?
Yeah. He struck out the side.
And struck out the side.
That's one of those called apocryphal legends, I call. I don't quite believe it, but it's a great story.
It is a great
that's
story.
like this. That's like the story they would tell of my grandfather, who was from Mississippi, how he would some white man would approach him, he would pull out his gun and frighten the white man away. Now, I would love to think my grandfather did that.
Right.
I know what happened if you tried to do that in Mississippi in 1932, man.
And there's that legend that Babe Ruth pointed, to where his home run was. I never believed that. So, listen, I have a hard time believing Babe Ruth existed. To tell you, I mean, he's such a phantom, such a folk hero. But the documentary mentions the efforts of African Americans, including the Double V campaign. You kind of touched on that, led by the Pittsburgh Courier to fight for victory against fascism abroad and racial injustice at home during World War II. The Black press, speaking of the Pittsburgh Courier, the Black press, talk about the role, if you will, that the Black press played as far as covering the Negro Leagues.
Well, the Black press, going back to Chicago Defender, was there to let the community know, in the North, what was happening in the South. You had the Chicago Defender with Sinstack, you had the Pittsburgh Courier, you had other Black newspapers, and basically being a way for us as a community to see what was happening in America, what was happening to us as a people, And if it wasn't for, writers like Wendell Smith and others, who were proselytizing for integration of baseball, it probably might have taken even longer for it to happen, So the Black press was, the sad thing, Stacey, is that the impact that the Black press had in the 1900s, 19-teens, 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, they don't have that kind of impact anymore in America, but they were so important. It was so important, it was just so important that you had papers like the Courier and the Defender, phenomenal papers.
I was attended the recent White House Correspondents Association dinner, and the president did talk about the Defender and the New Pittsburgh Courier and its impact, and he still gives credit to the Black press today, so we really appreciate.
Oh, Joe Biden did that, huh? That's
smart. He gave us he threw us some accolades. So
That's good. That's good, man.
But listen, Effa Manley. Let's talk about Effa Manley, the owner of the New York Eagles. Spoke out against major league teams poaching players without compensation to the Negro Leagues. Can you discuss her role in advocating for the recognition and compensation, more just as importantly, of Black players?
Well, think about it this way. We grew up with that story of Jackie sitting at a table, signing a contract with Branch Rickey. He goes from being the Kansas City Monarch to being a Brooklyn Dodger, right? We don't understand, we never know that, until this film really, that if a player was asked to be picked up by another major league team, the owner would have to compensate the owner of the other team.
Right.
Take that player. What does Branch Rickey do? He just signs Jackie, and Jackie, there's no money exchange hands between him and the owners of the Kansas City Monarchs. And so Effa Manley was courageous to shout that out, man, to say, whoa, hold up. How can you take Don Newcomb? How can you take Roy Campanella? How can you take Jackie Robinson and not pay the team owners of the teams they came from? Now, the thing that we didn't discuss is, and this is something that somebody should dig into, is how come Roy, Don, and Jackie didn't say anything?
Yeah.
Or if they did, how come we don't know about it?
And Jackie remains a big hero among Major League Baseball. They have Jackie Robinson Day every year. And,
but you know how complicated the story was when it came to Paul Robeson.
Yeah.
It's never, this is the thing that's always good about making these docs, Stacey. The stories that we learn that are supposedly so black and white are much more shades of gray, and you learn that. So when she called out Branch Rickey, and as the guy says he was a cheat, that's not the Branch Rickey I heard about, or the one that I saw Harrison Ford play in 42, or the one I saw, what's his name, the actor play in the Jackie Robinson story in 1951.
Right. Wow. Well, the integration of Major League Baseball with the Negro Leagues. Tell me about, how did the integration of Major League Baseball and the success of Black players like Jackie Robinson impact the Negro League?
It was like a barn sale, man. When Jackie knocked open those doors, every major league team except, and you probably know this, except for the Boston Red Sox, grabbed a Negro League player. You know, Willie went to the Giants, Hank went to the Braves, Monty went to the Giants. You know, Larry Doby went to the Indians. You know, Sancho went to the Indians. The last major league team to integrate was the Boston Red Sox in 1959 with Pumpsy Green. You know. Wow.
So, in your research and your knowledge of the game, I mean, you know, we have Willie Mays in here, Hank Aaron. You have so many in this documentary that people really, if you don't know these guys, listen.
Well, you may not. I mean, this is a generational thing.
Well, listen, that's what I'm saying. You've got to find out who they are if you don't know them. But in your doing this film and your research and your knowledge, has there been discussions among those type of guys as to the best baseball player?
Oh no, this is not like. I don't think anybody's ever said who was the best baseball player.
Because you know, you always hear Babe Ruth, which I don't know if he's top 10.
Well, my top 10 includes Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, Ernie Banks, probably for me, Kurt Flood, Lou Brock, you know, Reggie Jackson, you know, Ricky Henderson. Those are my top 10. You know,
Ricky certainly was the greatest leadoff hitter.
Base stealer, and greatest leadoff hitter. But you know, everybody's different. I mean, when I did my basketball film about Bill Russell, that discussion was heavy. Who is the greatest player of all time?
If you go by championships, it's Bill Russell.
Yeah, but some people, I interviewed Kenny Smith or somebody, and he said he would say Kareem, Michael, and then Bill.
Wow.
You know, because it's a generational thing.
Yeah.
I grew up in the 60s, so Bill Russell is the one I saw. If you grew up in the 80s, it might be either Magic. If you grew up in the 90s, it's Michael.
Yeah. Well, I think Bill Russell's problem was that he played in Boston.
Hey, man.
Blessed in the courage, right?
It was a profile in courage, but also remember, 11 championships in 13 seasons. Nobody's going to break that record.
And that's what I say. And just for the record, in baseball, I always say the two greatest, and you could put one ahead of the other, I would still not have a problem with, is Willie Mays and Barry Bonds. So those are my guys.
Barry Bonds, huh? All right.
Yeah. You know, if you're the anti-steroid type or believe that he took steroids, he took steroids. Well, even before he took steroids, he was the best.
Oh, he was a great baseball player. Yeah.
Listen, the league portrays the movie The League, the documentary portrays the Negro Leagues as a vibrant example of Black enterprise, self-determination, and excellence. Discuss overall, I know we've been talking about it, but the legacy of the Negro Leagues and their significance, not just in African-American history, but American history.
Well, think of it this way. The Negro Leagues, people like Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, artists like Elizabeth Catlett, you know, and Jacob Lawrence, all of these people made tremendous contributions to American history. So when you think about the Negro Leagues, you just don't say, oh, there was some Negro League ball players who played some good baseball. They were part of this fabric that makes America great. And, you know, and this notion that makes America great is so jaded by this other group of people. They understand that our contribution as Black people is part and parcel what shaped this country. You know, the negative part of our contribution and the positive part. And if you can wrap your head around that, then you'll really be, in my estimation, a good American.
Wow. Any surprises for you as you did this? Anything that really surprised you, stood out?
The F. Manley story surprised me. I didn't really know that story. That was a really great surprise. And Ruth Foster, I had known a little bit about it, but I got to learn more. That was great storytelling for me.
Yeah.
And the relationship between Cuss Composing and Gus Greeley, that was also interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In Northern Jersey, I want to say Newark, but I'm not. I might be off, and perhaps they rebuilt an old stadium.
Yeah, they did. They reopened it. Yep.
Yeah. How important is that? And can we ever? Do you ever envision maybe a Negro minor leagues or something in the future?
Well, it depends if you get young people, young African American people to get more interested in baseball. You know, in the South, they probably are, because in the recreations we shot, we used African American ball players from university. So we had them. But the challenge with baseball nowadays, and unless these new rules can help energize the game, for most young people, particularly Black people, it's a slow game.
Right.
You know, I mean, unless you know, I mean, how many people have the patience nowadays to sit through a 3-hour game? I do, but I grew up with baseball.
Right.
But you know, when my daughters were in their teens, I took them to a baseball game to Yankee Stadium, man. And by the 5th inning, they were done.
Well, you remember double headers, right?
Oh, sure.
That used to be scheduled. Now, of course, it takes the rain out to get a double header. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure you sat in stadiums with many a double headers, like I did.
I did, yeah, man. But I was a huge baseball fan. I was a huge baseball fan from probably 1960 to probably when I took my son to St. Louis, because I was a St. Louis Cardinals fan when he was 15, and that was like 1994, you know. And then I sort of stopped watching baseball, but recently, since I moved to Baltimore, and I live down the block from Camden Yards, I've been going to some games.
And they're having quite a year so far this year.
Oh, they're having a great year, man.
Yeah.
Great
year. You mentioned being a Cardinals fan. I'm a New York Mets fan. And
oh, God, how could you be a New York Mets fan?
I'm from New York, but the best trade in the history of the game
was
when we fleeced the Cardinals out of Keith Hernandez.
Oh, yeah. That was the best trade, because Keith was a phenomenal first baseman, man.
The greatest defensive first baseman I've ever seen. No question about it. Should be in the Hall of Fame. I guess aside from the Pittsburgh scandal and the fact that he didn't hit for a lot of power, but this guy was absolutely revolutionized that position.
I agree. Yeah. That was the only reason I started watching the Mets, when Keith came over. Okay.
Yeah. He helped us win a World Series. That's for sure. Yeah. But this is really the league. This was greatly conceived. Obviously, folks, you got to see this film. It is top notch. Sam Pollard, what a job! We appreciate you bringing this to the Black press and bringing it, most importantly, to the world, because everybody needs to see this. I'm going to give you a last thought on this before we let you go. Overall, your message to folks about the history of the Negro Leagues.
Simple. If you watch this film, you're learning a part about American history that has been unrecognized, given little attention, and now is front and center, and embrace it, because you will learn something about economics in the Black community. You'll learn something about the sport of baseball. You'll learn something about how these Negro League players and the legacy of these players inform Major League Baseball tremendously.
Awesome. Well, check out the league. It premieres, what's the premiere date, Sam?
I think it's July 6th, July 7th. July 7th.
Oh, July 7th. Either way, look for it, folks. You won't be disappointed whether you're a sports fan or not. This is one to watch. Thanks so much, Sam Pollard, for joining the Black Press's Let It Be Known. We appreciate you.
My pleasure, Stacey.
Take care.
Bye.